Last time on Dragon Ball Z.
I mean, look at Sinners for example. Despite all the great and glowing reviews, and having a pretty decent opening weekend, it still has yet to make back its $90 million budget.
That one didn't age quite so well.
I hope y'all are enjoying these dramatic thumbnails and titles, because I'm definitely enjoying making them. So in my previous video, I discussed different reasons as to why new movies are failing, new original non-franchise movies specifically. And since that video released, many people expressed various other reasons I didn't even touch on. So I want to make this video as a follow-up and talk about some of those topics, but also bring up another huge factor that I didn't mention because I was saving it for its own video, and that's the overall quality of modern films, as well as talk about the strides and impact that Sinners has made. Originally I wanted to include this in the previous video, but felt this section would have overshadowed the other talking points and taken up most of the video. But after seeing the reaction in the comments, I probably should just include it anyway. But that gives me a chance to focus on it more, as well as talk about how Sinners' success could help change things. Because it's been a while since a new original film was getting this much attention, not only with review scores, but financially as well, which is very refreshing to see. Now I don't really want to talk about the movie itself, because I'm more interested in talking about the deal that was struck with Warner Bros. To get it made. So this is how we're going to do this. I'm going to start off with the smaller points that I saw people brought up that I didn't mention first, and then I'll get to the quality and Sinners stuff after. Timestamps below if you just want to skip ahead. So, let's get into it. Alright, so first things first, ticket prices. I saw this brought up several different times. About the average price of a ticket nowadays is $15. And it's crazy, in the last 10 or 15 years, it's gone from $5 to $7.50 to $10 to now on an average of $15. So of course this raises the price of admission. Yeah, $15 isn't a crazy amount, but it is on the verge of just enough that makes you reconsider even going out in the first place. Not long ago, Quentin Tarantino actually talked about this very topic, and how it just deters people from wanting to go out. Adam Devine also spoke about this. And since all ticket prices are $15, regardless if you see a smaller indie movie or a big budget film, he feels most people will just kind of gravitate towards the big budget franchise movie because it seems like you're getting a better deal because it's a $150 million movie. It's like you're getting more bang for your buck. So why spend $15 on the smaller indie movie that you've never heard of? Or you can go with the safe bet to get something that's, worth $150 million on the screen. So are ticket prices a huge factor? It honestly just depends on who you ask. But considering a lot of people remember a time where it was only $5 to $10 per ticket, I would say it definitely plays a factor. The next point I saw brought up is the end of the movie star era. And basically, stars don't sell tickets like they used to. No longer can you just put an actor's face and his name on a poster and it will get people to buy tickets. Very famously, Anthony Mackie said this years ago, and every year that passes by, this just becomes more and more true. I mean, yeah, don't get me wrong, there are still a lot of new up-and-coming stars, names that people recognize. I mean, you see names like Timothée Chalamet or Zendaya all the time online. And hell, there's several of the old guard that's still making movies to this day. Tom Cruise, Brad Pitt, Jason Statham, Leonardo DiCaprio, guys who've been on top for the last, 15, 20 years? Not to mention the absolute legends like Denzel Washington, Al Pacino, Robert De Niro. But you see, a big problem is, there's no one around today that even reached the same heights as the older guard. So it appears that, quite frankly, Hollywood isn't producing as many stars. At least, not to that same level. I actually remember a few years back that Quentin Tarantino mentioned that the MCU isn't creating new stars. And that kind of holds true when you look at a lot of these actors' movies outside of the MCU. They don't do so hot, despite the fact that they were in a huge franchise film.
Like Anthony Mackie isn't a movie star. The Falcon is a movie star.
So it just seems that a lot of general audiences aren't as enticed by movie stars like they used to be. And it almost seems like a lot of modern actors can't reach the same heights as those from decades ago. And the last topic I want to talk about briefly is the MCU taking over. This one I saw mentioned quite a few times. And basically with the rise of the MCU, it did a few different things. I mean, first off, it eliminated certain genres. Because a lot of these comic book movies aim to be PG-13 action comedies. So why would you fund a new R-rated action film or raunchy comedy when clearly it's safer just to put that money towards these type of movies instead? Adam Devine and a YouTuber named Jimmy the Giant discussed how the MCU negatively impacted the comedy genre. And honestly, it's pretty hard to dispute. When these movies start to take off, a lot of studios started following suit and try to recreate the same tone and feel. And of course, you got the would-be shared cinematic universes that studios started to capitalize on. So at the time, it was kind of cool seeing all these connected Marvel projects. But when looking back, it's easy to see how much harm it actually did to the industry, with a whole lot of imitators trying to copy and paste the success, as well as drastically changing the comedy and action film genres. And I think it's gonna about do it for the smaller topics. Now let's move on to the main focus of the video. Alright, so to put it bluntly, the average quality of a modern film has dropped significantly, and is mostly questionable prior to a film's release. This makes people even more hesitant to see a new movie because the quality of a lot of modern films, established franchises mostly, have dropped. And since the quality of these big recognizable franchises and series seem to vary in between entries, it makes people less likely to check out a film they've never even heard of. have. And instead they opt to fall back on what's familiar because they have an idea of what they're getting into. And they kind of fall into the mindset of, okay, maybe this time it's actually good. So where did this drop in quality come from? Well, it's a few different reasons that's been going on for probably decades at this point. I mean, for starters, there's the rise of the PG-13 rating and how studios wanted to cater to that audience to maximize sales. We saw this greatly affect action and horror films in the mid-2000s, and we're still feeling it to this day, although it's not as egregious as it was back then. There's also the rise of streaming killing physical media, meaning that studios get less return on investment after a movie leaves theaters. So, studios want a safe bet to minimize the risk on their end, and often this leads to a very lukewarm, mid, or just bad movies.
It feels like movies sometimes get inundated with studio notes, and all of a sudden what was once an original idea becomes boiled down to the lowest common denominator, and then you have no one's favorite movie, but everyone's like lukewarm movie.
Movies by committee is a popular term people use, or it's basically just going down a checklist of things that the film has to include that the studio wants to appeal to as many people as possible, which ultimately makes the film feel very generic, boring, and really uninspired or uncreative, which then ends up appealing to absolutely no one. Going back to the MCU example I mentioned earlier, this is another byproduct of that. The studio is trying to recreate that success and formula, so they try to make their films feel the same way to hit all the same boxes, just so they can try to capitalize on that success. And often this comes through as a shallow, boring, cheap imitation, which leads to a lot of movies just kind of feeling samey. They have the same banter, same jokes, and overall just visually very boring. And what doesn't help is that review sites like Rotten Tomatoes are easily manipulated, giving viewers a false impression, leading them to check out a movie that really wasn't that good. So you can't really trust early reviews either, because you can't tell if it's genuine or the reviews were bribed with early screenings and press interviews to sway their opinions. This leads to a lot of people doing the wait and see approach, where they wait and hear how everyone else responds to it, but usually what ends up happening is they forget about it and never check out the film anyway. And then all this culminates together and deters people away from seeing new original movies when they release, despite saying they want new movies. And it's just, they can't trust the overall quality. This was the biggest thing people talked about in the comments of the last video. Why even bother when it's probably not going to be that good? When it's just marking off a checklist for a studio trying to appeal as many people as possible. Nerfing the film and its ideas, lacking any creativity, just blended in with everything else and ended up pleasing no one. So yeah, there are a lot of original films being released now. Not as much as there used to be, sure, but when they aren't marketed poorly, people are still hesitant to check it out because they've been burned so many times before, because the quality has just dropped that low. So they hesitate on seeing it and then they never end up watching it. And instead they fall back on what's familiar in the hopes that something they used to like is good again. But every now and again, there are exceptions and something new and original shines through. And this is where we talk about Sinners.
Saw Sinners. It's about evil Irish vampires attacking black people to steal their souls and music. It kind of hyped me up.
So like I already mentioned, Sinners is doing quite well. It's been a while since a brand new original film has gotten this much steam and attention, not just with positive reviews and word of mouth, but also financially. Originally, I was a little worried hearing about its $90 million budget, but now after 2 weeks of being in theaters, it made back its budget, and it's been very consistent at the box office. There's no significant drops. So honestly, it's all uphill from here. And also with all the attention and hype that this film is getting, pretty certain it'll stay in theaters as long as it can to try to get as much revenue as it can. Which is good, because like I mentioned before, it's become a very common thing for when a movie isn't doing well, that after like 2 weeks, the studio will just make it available to rent at home. So far that hasn't happened with Sinners, so that's a great sign. So yes, the movie is doing great, but what I want to talk about specifically is the deal that Ryan Coogler struck with Warner Bros. To get the film made, because it's a pretty interesting one. For starters, it gives him creative freedom and say on the final cut, as well as what's called first dollar gross payout on the film. So basically, he'll get paid before the studio gets paid for the movie. And then finally, ownership and the rights of the film return back to him after 25 years. So yeah, it's a pretty damn sweet deal, but also a really big gamble on the studio's part. Apparently this was the same deal that Ryan Coogler pitched with every single studio, and they all turned him down except for Warner Brothers. And it's kind of a crazy gamble when we really think about it, because not only are they giving someone $90 million, but they have little to no say on how the film actually turns out. And as soon as the film is released, instead of recuperating your own money, you pay back the director who made it. And then top it all off, you get rid of the rights to the film after 25 years. It makes you wonder why Warner Bros. Would ever agree to something like this. Well, for starters, after multiple mergers and buyouts, and people getting fired and leaving positions, they're kind of desperate, and it seems like they're willing to try anything. And I'm pretty certain after spending the last decade as being known as one of the worst movie studios to work for, I think they're ready for a turnaround, and try to get back in the good graces of producers, directors, and writers. Now, Ryan Coogler has mentioned that, even though this is a pretty rare deal, it's not the first time it happened in Hollywood. I mean, how Mel Gibson and Quentin Tarantino own the rights to several of their films. And of course, throughout Hollywood, there has been directors who get control of the final cut of the film. But what makes this so unique is is that this special deal is done for a relatively younger director. I mean, he's only 38, and this is only his 5th film, and already he's been given a pretty sweet deal. Typically, special deals like this are only done for like the top echelon of directors. But the thing I want to talk about the most right now is the amount of creative freedom that he has been given. Basically, it was no strings attached, and he got to do what he wanted. And by letting him have more originality and creativity, it created a more unique and memorable viewing experience. And would you look at that, people are talking about it and people are seeing it. It's kind of strange. If you let the writers and directors just make the movie without interfering too much, it leads to an overall better product. And when it's successful like this, it helps prop up writers and directors so that now in the future, it'll help sell their next movie by attaching their name to it. This is literally what A24 does. Kind of like how people look forward to a Jordan Peele or Christopher Nolan movie. Now, I have issues with their films, but for me to say they aren't at least unique, creative, or different would be a lie. And overall, it leads to a pretty memorable viewing experience. Of course, this isn't an exact science or a guarantee. Scorsese or Ridley Scott, for example, they got some flops after even making some masterpieces. But by letting these directors and writers actually put real effort and creativity into their films, it'll help them shine through and stand out from the safe movie by committee slop that gets pushed out and forgotten. Now, does this mean every newcomer whose first day on the set should be able to do whatever they want? Well, no. Ryan Coogler was able to get this deal because not only did he do Creed, but he did the 2 Black Panther movies too, so he had a lot of pull to help get this deal made. But in general, like a lot of people have been saying, they should give more power and control to the creators. And that's one of the biggest takeaways from Ryan Coogler's deal, is that he's a relatively younger director with only 5 films under his belt, getting an immense amount of creative freedom that only top tier directors really get. And yes, this is a big gamble on the studio's part because they could give someone the creative freedom and a lot of money, but maybe the audience just doesn't like the movie. Yeah, that could happen. Hell, that has happened. But at least they'll be more entertaining than watching the same old, boring, generic slop we've been getting for years. Now, I don't think this will forever change the studio system for how they make movies going forward, at least not overnight, but hopefully a deal like this and the film's success shows big studios that, hey, it's okay to back off every once in a while. Alright, yeah, so I think it's gonna about do it. I guess y'all say. So, see ya.
How'd that get in there? Oh, don't cry.
Turn it off. Turn it off!